I raise our son alone now, and he still asks when mommy is coming home. My wife engineered that surprise pregnancy just to stop me leaving, then walked out the week after his first birthday. I never wanted him, she said at the door. I looked at her and said something I'll never take back. The week after my son's first birthday, my wife set a packed suitcase by the front door. Theo was still in his high chair, cake on his hands, the smoke from 2 candles still in the air. She didn't look at him, she looked at me. I never wanted him. 4 words. Flat. Like she was returning a coat she'd never liked. I'd stayed in that marriage for one reason. A pregnancy she swore was an accident. I'd rebuilt my entire life around a boy she'd apparently never planned to keep. She picked up the suitcase and asked me to move. My son reached for her, and I said one sentence back. Quiet. Steady. A sentence I have never regretted and never will. 15 months later, she walked into a courtroom to take him from me with no idea what that sentence had already set in motion. I'm Nolan, 31. I build cabinets for a living, which means I spent that whole first year learning to be somebody's father with sawdust on my hands. And apparently, I was the only one of us who ever meant to stay. Let me tell you how she came back. It started with a certified letter on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are slow at the shop, and Theo was with me. He's 2 now. He has a step stool I made him, pine, sanded soft, low enough that he can climb it and help. He stands on it by my workbench and hands me clamps he can't lift and tells me they're heavy. They're not. He just likes the word. I was midway through a kitchen island for a family across town. 40 grand of white oak I couldn't afford to ruin when the mail truck pulled up the gravel. The driver needed a signature. That's the thing about certified mail. Somebody has to look you in the eye and confirm they found you. I signed. Theo signed too, in the air with his whole arm. I opened it standing up, one hand still steadying the stool. Petition for modification of custody in the matter of the minor child, Theodore Hendricks. Petitioner, Corinne Hendricks. I read the caption 3 times. My wife's name, my ex-wife's name, printed above my son's like a claim being staked. Theo held up a clamp. Heavy, Daddy. Real heavy, bud. My hands were fine. I want you to know that. I kept my voice level and I helped him set the clamp down, and I did not let one thing in my face change because he was watching, and he is always watching, and that is the entire job. But under the bench, where he couldn't see, I read the first line of the relief she was requesting, and the floor of my life tilted about 10 degrees and did not come back. See. I couldn't finish the island that afternoon. That's how I knew it was bad. I've worked through a lot, but I don't put a router near 40 grand of oak with my hands not entirely my own. I put Theo in the truck and drove him to the park instead, and I pushed him on the baby swing for an hour while I did the thing I do when I'm scared, which is take a problem apart into its pieces so it stops being one big shape I can't lift. Piece 1. She'd filed. After 15 months of nothing. Piece 2. The timing. Nothing had changed on my end, so something had changed on hers. Piece 3. The word soul. Not shared, not visitation, soul. Higher, Daddy! I pushed him higher. He shrieked the good shriek. A woman on the next bench smiled at us the way people smile at a dad alone with a toddler on a Tuesday. A little extra, like I was doing something brave instead of just doing the only thing there is to do. I smiled back, and I thought about the petition folded in my jacket. And I thought, whatever this is, it is not going to touch him. Not the fear of it, not the fact of it. He is going to keep shrieking on this swing like the world is a safe place, because for him it is, because I made it that way, on purpose, out of nothing. That was the promise I renewed on a park bench that afternoon. It's the same promise I'd made in a doorway 16 months before. I still haven't told you what I said in that doorway. It's coming. But you should know that everything I did next, I did to keep it. That night, after Theo was down, I read the whole petition at the kitchen table, and I understood the shape of it. Primary physical custody, sole custody actually, the word was right there, applied to the woman who once described our son as a coat she never liked. Child support, calculated on my income. And one more line, near the bottom, in the flat language lawyers use so the cruel things don't sound cruel. Petitioner requests appointment as custodial trustee of the Minors Trust. I need to explain the trust because it's the hinge everything turns on. And if you don't understand it, you'll think this is just a story about a woman who missed her kid. It isn't. My father, my stepfather, Walter, the man who taught me the trade and earned the name, died when Theo was 4 months old. He never got to hold him longer than an afternoon, but he set up a trust for his grandson before he went. A little over $400,000, everything he'd saved from 40 years of the same work I do. It pays out slowly. College, a first house someday. And until Theo turns 18, whoever has custody of him administers it. Corinne had been in the room when the estate lawyer read the terms out loud. I remember it because she'd gone very quiet, and I'd mistaken it for grief. She'd asked one question, not about Walter, about the number. I set the petition down on the table, face down. I keep thinking about that one question. At the time, it slid right past me. Now it sits in my chest like a splinter you find weeks later under the skin, and you realize it's been there the whole time, doing quiet damage while you weren't looking. Boss, I called my mother the next morning. Maureen, 60 years old, widowed 8 months, and the reason I know how to do any of this. She drove over inside the hour, still in her coat, and read the petition at my table with her reading glasses pushed up her nose. She got to the trustee line and set the paper down very carefully, the way you set down something you'd like to throw. She left him, my mother said. She left him in his high chair. I know. I was here. I helped you scrub cake out of that boy's hair while you stood at the window. I know, Mom. I did know, because I keep going back to that doorway whether I want to or not. The suitcase, the smoke from the candles, the way Theo lifted both arms toward her, the reach babies do, the one that means pick me up, the one no one is supposed to be able to refuse. She refused it. I never wanted him, she'd said. And then something about needing me to move so she could get the door. I moved, and before she went, I said one thing back to her, quiet. For 15 months, it was the only thing about that night I felt good about. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She is not getting that boy, she said. I wanted to believe her, but I'd read enough of the petition to know it wasn't up to us. It was up to a judge who'd never scrubbed cake out of anyone's hair. Before I go any further, if this is already sitting heavy in your chest, take a second to like this video and subscribe. It genuinely helps these stories reach the people who need them. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. I read every one, and on the hard nights, they remind me I'm not talking into an empty room. Now, let me tell you what my lawyer said. His name is Grant Sullivan, family law, 22 years, the kind of man who says the true thing before the comforting thing. I sat across his desk with a folder I'd put together. Theo's pediatric records, the daycare enrollment, the mortgage in my name, photos I didn't need but brought anyway, because some part of me thought love could be filed as evidence. Grant went through it slowly. Then he took off his glasses. You have a strong case, he said. I want to be honest about what strong means. Okay. It doesn't mean you can't lose. He explained it the way you'd explain deep water to someone who's only ever seen a pool. Courts don't punish. Courts weigh. The standard is the best interest of the child, and a big piece of that is stability. But another big piece is a child's relationship with both parents, and family courts lean hard toward putting a mother back in a young child's life. She abandoned him, I said. She'll say she was struggling. Postpartum depression, that she wasn't in her right mind, that you were cold, that she left to protect him from a household falling apart. He held up a hand before I could argue. I'm not saying it's true. I'm telling you what 15 months of silence can be dressed up as by a good attorney, and Corinne has a good attorney. How good? Good enough that she filed for the trust in the same breath as the boy, which tells me something. He leaned back. It tells me this might not be about Theo at all. But if we say that in front of the judge and we can't prove it, we're just the bitter ex-husband, and bitter ex-husbands lose. I thought about the reach. Both arms, pick me up. So what do? You be exactly what you already are, Grant said. Steady, boring, present. And you let her show the court who she is before we ever have to say it out loud. I nodded like I understood. I didn't, not yet. I still thought this was a fight I could win by being good. Grant gave me homework, and it was the strangest homework of my life. Keep doing what you're already doing, but write it down. Not a case file, not a diary of her sins. Grant was firm about that. "Don't you dare keep a notebook of everything Corinne does wrong," he said. "It reads as obsessive. It makes you the one who's fixated. Keep a record of him, his life, what a normal week is." So I did. Well, visits at the pediatrician, on schedule, everyone. The dentist. The little developmental notes daycare sends home. I put them in a plain folder, not because I thought I'd need them, but because it turned out I already lived a life that documented itself, if anyone bothered to look. That was Grant's real point. He wasn't telling me to build a case. He was telling me I'd already built one, out of Tuesdays. Let me show you a Tuesday. 5:40, Theo's up, which means I'm up. Diaper, then the negotiation about which shirt. He has opinions, all of them about tractors. Breakfast is oatmeal he mostly wears. He stands on his stool at the counter and stirs, which means he moves the spoon in the air near the bowl while I actually stir. Daycare by 8. He does the thing where he clings for exactly 4 seconds and then spots the water table and forgets I exist, which is the goal, which still gets me a little every time. Then the shop. I do the loud, dangerous work in those hours. The saw, the router, the joinery that needs both hands and a clear head. Pickup at 4:30. Dinner, bath, 2 board books, the white noise machine, the doorway. That's the whole devastating secret of my life. There isn't one. It's a man and a boy, and a routine built plank by plank. A lawyer told me to write it down, and when I read it back, I understood for the first time that this boring, load-bearing ordinariness was the thing Corinne would have to stand in a courtroom and pretend didn't exist. I spent those first weeks learning a system I'd never had reason to understand, and what I learned scared me more than Corinne did. The law doesn't start from who's been the parent. It starts from a preference for two. Reunification, they call it. The idea, usually a good one, that a child does best with both parents in the picture. A judge looks at a man asking to keep a mother out and, understandably, gets cautious. The default lean is toward putting her back in and making me prove why not. Nobody warns single fathers about that part. There's a whole quiet assumption baked into the system that a dad alone is a temporary situation, a placeholder until a mother returns. I felt it everywhere. At the pediatrician's, forms that said mother's name first. At daycare, the other parent's surprise, warm but real, that I was the one at every pickup. Strangers who told me how great it was that I was babysitting my own son. I wasn't babysitting. I was his whole world, and I was about to have to convince a court that being his whole world for 15 straight months counted for more than a signature on a certificate and a good cry on the stand. That's the thing I want the men listening to hear, and the women too. Being the one who stayed is not the same as being the one the system expects. I'd done everything right, and I still had to walk in and prove I was the safe one, while the person who walked out got to start from, she's the mother. I don't say that bitter. I'm sorry. I say it so you'll know. If you're carrying a kid alone and it feels like you're playing an away game, you're not imagining it. Play it anyway. Win it anyway. I did.
What's so?
You want to know how a man ends up married to someone who never wanted his child? He doesn't see it. That's the honest answer. I met Corinne when I was 26. Her family had money, the kind that summers somewhere and says, the lake house, like everyone has one. Mine had a garage that smelled like wood glue. Her mother, Marielle, told her at the rehearsal dinner in front of me that she was marrying down but marrying kind. I laughed it off. Corinne didn't correct her. By our second year, I could feel her getting bored. Bored of the shop. Bored of me choosing a good job over a flashy one. She stayed out. I slept in the guest room, and in the spring of our 3rd year, I did the hardest math of my life and decided I was going to leave. I had a duffel half packed on the bed when she came in and told me she was pregnant. She was crying. She said the pill must have failed. She took my hand and put it on her stomach and said, "Please don't leave us." Us. I unpacked the bag. I want to be clear about who I was that night because it matters later. I wasn't trapped. I chose it. A man does not get to blame a baby for a decision he made with his own 2 hands. Whatever was broken between me and Corinne, that child would have a father who stayed. I just didn't know that the pill must have failed was a sentence she had rehearsed. That's the whole backstory. I'm not going to give you more of it because the past is not where I live now. Theo is not the past. Let me get back to the fight for him.
Hey.
Marielle came to the shop 3 days after Grant and I met. She parked her white SUV across 2 spaces and came in wearing sunglasses she didn't take off, which is a thing certain people do to let you know they're only visiting your life briefly. Theo was napping in the office on a cot I keep there. She glanced at him through the glass with an expression I can only call inventory. "He's gotten big," she said, like she'd seen him last month. She'd seen him at 11 months. Once. Since. "What do you want, Marielle?" She smiled and set her purse on my workbench, on top of the oak I'd been finishing. "I want us to be reasonable. Corinne's been through a lot. She wasn't well. You of all people saw that. This doesn't have to be ugly. We're prepared to be generous." Generous. Shared custody. A clean split. You keep your little business, she gets her son back in her life, and that money your father left. Well, it's for Theo's family. It should be managed by Theo's family. She said family like it was a room I wasn't allowed in. There it was, out loud in my own shop, with my son asleep 20 feet away. I thought about the rehearsal dinner, marrying down. "You told her a baby fixes a marriage," I said. "Didn't you? Before the wedding." For half a second, the sunglasses weren't enough. Something moved behind them. "A baby," Marielle said, picking her purse back up, "was supposed to fix a great many things." She walked out. I looked at the board she'd set her bag on. A little half-moon of grit pressed into the finish. I sanded it down that night after Theo was asleep, sanded it clean. There are marks you can take out of the wood. I was starting to learn which ones you can't. 2 days later, she came back. Not to the shop, to the game. She showed up at Corinne's play in a way I didn't see coming, because I'm a woodworker, and I think in objects and deadlines, and Marielle thinks in rooms and rumors. A client canceled on me. A good one. The Kitchen Island family, 40 grand of oak. The wife called, awkward, apologetic, said they'd decided to go a different direction. When I pressed, gently she went quiet, and then she said, "Nolan, I heard some things about the custody stuff. I'm sure it's not. I just don't want to be in the middle of anything." I hung up and stood in my shop with a half-built island I now had no buyer for, and understood that Corinne had opened a second front. She'd started calling people, mutual friends, church people, the moms from the little playgroup we'd gone to for exactly 3 weeks when Theo was tiny. She was telling a story, a soft, tearful, expertly aimed story about a mother fighting to get back the son a controlling husband had kept from her. Public shame. That was her weapon. She couldn't take Theo yet, so she'd take my name in town first, one coffee at a time, and let the whisper do the work. I called Grant. He was quiet a second. "She's building the narrative outside the courtroom, so it's already in the air inside it," he said. "It's smart, ugly, but smart." Then, "Don't answer it. Don't post, don't explain, don't defend. Every word you say chasing this makes it look truer. You keep building your boring, safe, documented life. Let her spread a story about a man who spends his weekends at the park with his son. See how far that gets her." Easy for him to say. He didn't have to walk into the hardware store and feel the temperature of the room change. The whisper campaign worked for about 3 weeks, and then it did the thing whispers do when the person they're about is quietly, obviously, not the villain. It started to turn. The daycare director, a woman named Pam, who's watched me pick Theo up 4 days a week for over a year, pulled me aside at drop-off. "Somebody called here," she said low, "asking about you. Whether Theo seemed neglected, whether you were ever short with him. Pam has a face like a closed door when she wants it. I told them what I see, which is a dad who's early every day and knows every kid's name in that room, not just his own." She squeezed my arm. I wrote it down too, in case anybody official ever asks. I almost lost it right there in the cubby room, over the little coats. I didn't, but I want you to notice something. Because it's the whole engine of how this ended. Corinne fought with lies whispered in private, and every place her whisper landed, it landed on somebody who had actually watched me be his father. She was spending a currency I'd spent 2 years earning the hard way. You can't gossip your way past a year of a man showing up early. It turns out the truth has witnesses when you've lived it in front of people. She found a way to reach me even before the courtroom, or she made it look like an accident. It was a Saturday, the farmer's market downtown, Theo on my shoulders with his fists in my hair. And there was Corinne coming the other way down the row of stalls in a soft dress, phone already up, a friend beside her holding a second phone. "Theo!" she called out, bright, arms opening, her voice pitched for the recording. Baby, it's Mommy! Theo went rigid on my shoulders. He didn't reach for her. He gripped my hair harder and pressed his cheek down onto the top of my head and made himself small, the way kids do when the world hands them a thing too big to hold. I understood in 1 second what the phones were for. If I turned and walked, she'd have footage of a cruel father hauling a boy away from a weeping mother. If I stopped and let her take him in the middle of a market, no supervision, no order allowing it, I'd have handed her exactly what she wanted. So I did the only thing that was actually true. I crouched, slow, and brought Theo down into my arms where he wanted to be, and I said evenly, loud enough for the phones, "Hi, Corinne. This isn't the place. We'll see you at the exchange the court set." "You're keeping him from me," she said, still bright, still for the camera. "In front of everybody, you're keeping him from me." "No," I said. "I'm keeping him." And I carried my son to the truck at a walk, not a run, his face buried in my neck, and I did not look back, and I did not give her one frame she could use. She posted it anyway, cut so you couldn't hear the words, 30 seconds of a mother reaching and a father turning away. The comments were brutal for a day. Then somebody who'd actually been at the market posted what she'd heard. And the thing about a staged moment is that it needs everyone else to have been looking the other way. They weren't. Marielle went after my mother next, which is how I learned that people like Marielle always find the person they think is softest. My mom golfs on Thursdays with the same 3 women she's golfed with for 20 years at a public course. Nothing fancy. Marielle showed up in the clubhouse. She doesn't golf. She lunches. And sat down at my mother's table uninvited in front of her friends and performed concern. "Maureen, I just think it's such a shame," she said. 2 grandmothers and that baby caught in the middle. I know Nolan means well, but a boy needs his mother, and Corinne is his mother, whatever anyone says. I'd hate to see Nolan turn this into a war. He was always so intense. My mother, 60 years old, widow of 8 months, set down her iced tea. "Marielle," she said in the voice she used to use when I'd lied to her as a boy, and she was giving me one chance to fix it. "I scrubbed birthday cake out of that baby's hair while your daughter drove away. Don't come to my golf course and tell me what a boy needs." She picked the tea back up. "Now, we're 4 holes behind. You'll have to excuse us." She told me about it that night at my kitchen table, and her hands weren't folded tight anymore. They were steady. "She wanted me to be afraid of you," my mother said. "The way I was supposed to be afraid of my own husband once. That whole family runs on making the decent one look like the dangerous one." She looked at me. "You are not the dangerous one, Nolan. You never were. Don't you dare start believing their story about you now, right when it counts." I've thought about that a lot since. How the people who leave love to convince you that the ones who stayed are the problem. How much strength it takes to just keep being the safe, boring, present thing while they tell everyone you're a threat. My mother had that strength. She'd needed it once for me. She had plenty left over.
Hey.
Grant put me through deposition prep like it was a physical. He sat across from me and became Corinne's lawyer for 2 hours. And he was vicious, on purpose because he said the room would be worse. "You made her feel trapped, didn't you, Mr. Hendricks?" "No, you wanted her gone." "I wanted her to stay. I asked her to." "You're very controlled. Do you ever lose your temper with the boy?" "That one I sat with. He watched me sit with it." "No," I said. "I raise my voice at a table saw sometimes. Never at him." "Good," Grant said, dropping the character. "That pause. Do that in the real thing. Don't perform calm. Be a man thinking. Juries and judges can smell a script." He tapped the table. "Here's the trap they'll set. They'll try to make your steadiness into coldness. A woman cries on that stand, and it reads as love. You stay level, and it can read as a man with something to hide. We have to make your calm mean the true thing, that you're the safe one in the room." "How?" "You let it crack exactly once," he said. "When it's real, not for the judge, for your son. And you'll know the moment when you're in it. You won't have to fake it. You'll have to survive it." I didn't understand that yet. I would. The nights were the hard part. Theo goes down at 7, and then the house gets quiet in a way that used to feel like peace, and now felt like a waiting room. I'd sit with the folder I wasn't supposed to obsess over and not open it, and listen to the white noise machine down the hall, and do the math I couldn't stop doing. What happens to him if I lose? Not to me, to him. Who explains bath time? Who knows he'll only drink from the green cup? Who answers when he calls Daddy into the dark? And what does it do to a boy when after a year of always being answered, the answer stops? I found a group, eventually. A handful of single fathers who met Tuesday nights in a church basement, folding chairs and bad coffee, half of them in custody fights of their own. I almost didn't go. Men aren't good at church basements. But I sat down, and a guy named Dave, who'd been through it, said one thing that got me through the worst of it. "They're going to make you prove you're not the monster," he said. "You'll want to get loud about how unfair that is. Don't. The calm is the proof. Boring men keep their kids." He sipped his terrible coffee. Be the most boring man that courtroom has ever seen. I went home that night and checked on Theo, asleep with one sock off, and I decided to be exactly that. The most boring, steady, present man anyone had ever put on a witness stand. It's the only kind of man worth handing a child to anyway. The guardian ad litem was a woman named Adele Prentice. If you've never been through a custody case, here's the person who decides your life that you didn't know existed. The court appoints a guardian ad litem, a GAL, to investigate what's actually best for the child, independent of what either parent wants. They visit your home. They watch you with your kid. They talk to the daycare, the pediatrician, the neighbors. And then they write a report that a judge leans on the way, a tired man leans on a wall. Adele came to the house on a Saturday morning. Sharp eyes, kind mouth, a notebook she didn't hide. Theo was wonderful, which is to say, he was himself. He gave her a tour of his step stool. He showed her the spice drawer he's allowed to open and the one he isn't. He fell down, considered crying, looked at me, decided against it. She watched that. She wrote something down. At the door, she said, "He's clearly bonded to you. That's evident." And I let myself breathe. Then she said, "Can I ask about your hours? The daycare has him 4 days a week, sometimes until 5:30. I run a shop," I said. "I restructured everything after his mom left. I do my heavy work when he's at daycare, and I've got him every evening, every weekend." "I'm not criticizing," she said gently. "I'm building a picture. His mother's petition describes a full-time, stay-at-home arrangement. A court will look at consistency of caregiving." She capped her pen. "I'm just telling you what the other side of the page says." I stood on my own porch and watched her drive off, and for the first time I understood that being good and being present might not be the same thing as winning. A woman who left could offer a courtroom a fantasy of full-time devotion, and I could only offer the truth, which is smaller and has daycare in it. Adele Prentice did her job thoroughly, which cut both ways, and I made myself be glad of it, even when it scared me. She talked to Theo's pediatrician, Dr. Rourke, who'd seen him for every well visit since birth, all of them made by me, all on time. She talked to Pam at the daycare. She came back to the house a second time, unannounced, on a weekday evening, which is the real test because a staged Saturday is easy, and a Tuesday at 6 with a tired toddler is the truth. She got the truth, dinner half on the floor, Theo melting down about the wrong cup, me on the kitchen floor negotiating peace over a sippy cup while something burned slightly on the stove. Not a magazine, a life. She wrote it all down, and near the end of that second visit, she crouched to Theo's level, the way good ones do, and asked him, casually, the way you ask a 2-year-old anything, "Who takes care of you, buddy?" Theo pointed at me with the whole flat of his hand. "Daddy," he said, "and Daddy." Then he thought about it, seriously, the way he thinks about heavy clamps. "And Nana, and Aunt Tessa gives me juice." "Anybody else?" Adele asked gently. Theo considered the entire population of the earth. The mailman, he decided. He did not say mommy, not because I coached him, I would never, but because at 2, your world is made of the people who are in it. And she wasn't. Adele wrote that down too, and I didn't feel triumphant about it. I felt the quiet grief under the whole thing. My son had built a complete, happy universe, and there was simply no room in it shaped like her, because she'd never once filled it. That's the part that doesn't make the highlight reel of a custody win. A little boy naming the mailman before he'd name his own mother. Nah. The next part I only learned because someone was brave enough to call me, and she almost didn't. Corinne has a younger sister, Tessa, 26, the one Marielle always compared unfavorably to Corinne. The one who dropped out of the family script years ago and works at a plant nursery and shows up to holidays late and leaves early. Tessa is the only person in that family who ever looked at Theo like he was a person instead of a lever. She texted me on a Thursday, 3 words, then nothing for an hour. "Can we talk?" We met at a diner 2 towns over because she didn't want anyone seeing her car near me. She held her coffee with both hands and didn't drink it. "I need you to know I love that kid," she said. "That's why I'm here. And if my mother finds out I talked to you, I'm done. Cut off. She's done it before." Okay. Corinne's not coming back because she misses him. Tessa's jaw worked. The guy she left for, he's gone. Took the lifestyle with him. She's living at Mom's again. And Mom found out exactly how much is in that trust. I already suspected. Hearing it out loud was different. It landed low. "There's something else," Tessa said. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, worn soft at the edges, like it had been handled a lot by someone who couldn't decide what to do with it. "She left this. The night she left, Mom told her to throw it out. I kept it." She slid it across the table. My name was on the front, in Corinne's handwriting. I didn't open it at the diner. I want to tell you I was calm about it. The truth is, I put it in my jacket and drove home with it against my chest, like it might get up and leave too. "Wish." I opened it that night, at the same table where my mother had read the petition. It was short. Corinne was never one for long apologies, or short ones. "Nolan, I can't do this. I tried and I can't. You're better at him than I'll ever be. I never wanted him, not really, and you knew that even if you won't say it. He's yours. Don't come after me for money. I don't have any, and I'm not coming back." See, I read it maybe 10 times. I never wanted him. She'd written it down, in her own hand, 15 months before she'd stand in a courtroom and swear that being kept from him had broken her heart. And here's the part that should tell you how the law actually works versus how you want it to work. I called Grant ready to celebrate, ready to say we're done. We've got her. He was quiet a second. "It's good," he said. "It's real good. But Nolan, a letter proves how she felt one night 16 months ago. Her lawyer will say she was in crisis, depressed, that people say things in the dark they don't mean." He paused. "It helps. It doesn't finish it. Nothing finishes it but the whole picture. And the whole picture needs someone to stand up and say, this is who she is. Paper doesn't stand up. People do." I put the letter into the folder with Theo's shot records and the mortgage, love and evidence in the same manila envelope after all. Then I went and stood in Theo's doorway and watched him breathe, because that's what I do when I can't fix the thing in my hands. What would you have done? Walked into that courtroom swinging the letter, or waited and prayed the sister would be brave? Sit with it. I'll tell you what happened. "Chud, where's Mama?" Theo asked it at daycare pickup, out of nowhere, buckled in with a cracker in his fist. He asks it like weather. It comes and goes. I've thought a lot about how to answer that question. You'd be surprised how many wrong ways there are. I could tell him the truth. He's 2. The truth would be a rock I tied to a 2-year-old. I could lie big. She's an angel. She loves you so much. Build him a mother out of fog and let him spend his childhood reaching for it. What I do is this. I say, "Mama couldn't stay, buddy, but I'm staying. I'm always staying." He thought about it, chewed his cracker. "You staying?" He agreed like he was doing me a favor. "Always. That's the vow underneath the vow. The one I made in the doorway that I still haven't told you. It's coming. It's close now." "What?" Tessa started meeting me on Sundays, quietly, before I knew she'd ever set foot in a courtroom. It began as her checking on Theo. It became something Theo needed. She'd come to the shop with terrible coffee and sit on an overturned bucket while he showed her every tool he wasn't allowed to touch, and she'd gasp at all the right times, and he'd glow. One Sunday, while Theo napped on the office cot, she told me about growing up a Vance. "Corinne was the one," she said. "The pretty one, the one Mom took to lunches, the one who got the good college fund. I was the practice kid, the one they figured out parenting on and then set aside." She turned her coffee cup around and around. "You know what my mother said when I got the nursery job? She said, 'Well, at least you're good with dirt.'" I didn't say anything. Some things you don't fix with words. You just don't do them to the next kid. "That's why I keep coming here," Tessa said, nodding at the cot. "He's got a dad who thinks the clamps he can't lift are a real contribution. You know what I'd have done for that? Just once?" She wiped her eyes, annoyed at herself. Sorry. God, ignore me. He loves you, I said. You're the only one from that side who ever showed up for him and not for something. She looked at the sleeping boy a long time. He is going to be so loved, she said, like a decision. I didn't understand until much later that a decision was exactly what it was. Not every day that season was heavy. I want to tell you about a good one, because Theo deserves to be more than the fight that was fought over him. One Saturday, a few weeks before trial, we built a birdhouse, his first real project. I cut the pieces. He sanded, which meant rubbing one spot on one board, with total devotion until it was smoother than anything else I own. He picked the paint. He picked blue. He picked blue for every single part, got most of it on himself, named the birdhouse Blue House, and hung it. I hung it on the maple out back. We sat on the steps after and watched it, waiting for a bird the way you wait for a bird when you're two and the world still owes you magic and usually pays up. No bird came. He didn't care. He leaned into my side, blue-handed, and said, "We made it, Daddy." "We sure did, bud." "Together," he clarified in case I'd missed the point. "Together," I said. I bring that Saturday up on the hard days, when the paperwork gets heavy and the whispers get loud and the whole thing feels like an away game. I go back to a blue birdhouse and a boy who wanted me to know we'd made it together. That's what all of it was for. Not to win. To keep the ordinary load-bearing magic of a Saturday like that in his life, where she couldn't come and take it back. Sigh. I took Theo to see Walter once during all this. My stepfather's grave. A plain stone. The good kind of plain. The kind Walter would have chosen himself. I don't fully know why I went. To think, maybe, Walter was the man who showed up in my life when my first father left it. The one who taught me the trade, who never once made me feel like another man's leftover kid, who chose me on purpose when he didn't have to. Everything I know about being a father, I learned from a man who wasn't obligated to be mine and decided to be anyway. Theo put a rock on the headstone because he puts rocks on things. For Grandpa Walter, I told him, and he said Grandpa Walter very seriously, to a name attached to a face he'll never remember. Standing there, I finally understood what the trust really was. Not $400,000. A message, Walter's last way of saying, this boy is chosen, he is provided for, he belongs. And Corinne wanted to reach into that message, pull out the money, and leave the meaning on the ground. I wasn't going to let her, not because I'm greedy. I'd burn every dollar of it before I'd let it become her reason, because Walter chose me the way I choose Theo, and that trust was proof that in this family the men stay, and the staying is the inheritance. That was never going to be hers to administer. Grant called on a Wednesday and told me to sit down. I was already sitting, in the shop, sawdust in the light. Financial disclosures came in, he said. Corinne's, I want to walk you through it because it changes our whole approach. She was broke, worse than broke. The boyfriend she'd left us for had bankrolled a life she couldn't afford on her own, and when he left, it all came due. Credit cards, a repossessed car living at Marielle's. Here's what matters, Grant said. Child support flows to the custodial parent. And the trust, if she's named custodial trustee, she controls the disbursements. There are guardrails, but there are gaps. And a determined parent can lean on that money for the child's household expenses. He let it sit. Nolan, I've done this 22 years. I think she wants the boy because the boy comes with an income and a bank account. I think that's the actual case. I looked over at the office glass. Theo was asleep on the cot, one sock off, the way he always ends up. Can we prove it? Not yet, Grant said. But people who are really after money have a hard time not saying so, especially when they're losing. Our whole job is to keep our hands clean and let her reach. Reach. There was that word again. The gesture Theo made toward her. The thing you're not supposed to be able to refuse. She was about to make one of her own, and this time there'd be a room full of people to see it. 2 weeks out from trial, Corinne's lawyer opened a new front, and this one came for the shop. They subpoenaed my business records, every invoice, every account, the lease, the equipment loans. The theory was obvious once Grant explained it. Paint the woodworker as financially unstable, a man whose little business could fold any minute, unfit to be a sole provider, in contrast to a mother who, in Grant's dry words, has no income at all, but very supportive parents. For about a day, I was furious, in a way I hadn't let myself be through the whole thing. Not because I had anything to hide, because now they were reaching past me and Theo and grabbing at the one thing that was purely mine. The trade Walter taught me, the work that had kept my son fed through the worst year of my life. Then I did what the work taught me. I laid it all out clean. I'd never mixed a dollar. The shop was solvent. Tight sometimes, but solvent. Every loan current. 2 years of steady contracts, even through the Whisper campaign, because most people care more about whether you finish their kitchen on time than about gossip. My accountant, a no-nonsense woman named Ruth, put together a statement so boring and so airtight that Grant actually smiled. "This is beautiful," he said, turning pages. "You know what a judge sees here? Not a failing business. A man who's carried a mortgage, a shop, a trust, and a baby by himself for over a year without missing a payment or a pickup." He set it down. "They handed us their own best argument. Let them subpoena. Every page proves you're the stable one." That's the thing about attacking a man who actually did the work. The records don't lie for him, and they don't lie against him. They just show the Tuesdays, one after another, stacking up like joinery, holding weight. You can't cross-examine a paid invoice, and you can't shame a mortgage that was never once late. She texted me herself once near midnight, about a week before the temporary order hearing. I still have it. I'll never delete it, and I'll never answer it. I know things got bad between us, but I'm his mother, Nolan. A boy needs his mom. Don't make me fight you for my own child. We could still be a family. Odyssey. I read it 3 times, standing in my dark kitchen. We could still be a family. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Is he okay? Does he sleep through the night? Did his fever ever come back? Does he still do that thing with his hands?" Nothing about the actual boy. A family. The word aimed at me. The man, the thing she'd once used a pregnancy to hold. I set the phone face down on the counter. In the next room, Theo's white noise machine hummed. I went and stood in his doorway, and I did not text back. And that silence was the loudest thing I said all year. Then the court moved first and took part of the choice out of my hands. Corinne's lawyer filed for an emergency temporary order, unsupervised weekend visitation, effective before trial, arguing that every week without her mother harmed the child's reunification prospects. We got 20 minutes in a small courtroom. No witnesses, just lawyers and a judge with a heavy docket. And the bias I now understand is baked into the whole machine. Get the mother back in, sort the details later. Her lawyer painted it in pastels. A healed woman, a grieving mother, a little boy who deserved to know he had a mom. Grant argued stability, the abandonment, the 15 months of silence. He argued well. But an emergency hearing is a blunt instrument, and the judge that day wanted the safe-looking, reunify first answer that no appeals court ever second-guesses. He granted it, weekend visits, starting Saturday. I sat there and felt the system do the thing it does, reach past the truth for the tidy story. Not malice, just a heavy docket and an old assumption aimed at my son. Grant leaned over as we packed up. "This is temporary," he said. "This is not the trial. Do you hear me?" I heard him, but I'd have to hand my son to her in 4 days, and no amount of temporary makes that not happen.
Why?
I sat in the truck outside that little courthouse for 20 minutes before I could drive. 4 days. In 4 days, I'd put my son in the arms of a woman who'd left him in a high chair because a judge with a full docket had reached for the answer that gets appealed the least. Not because he was cruel, because the system is built to give a mother the benefit of the doubt, and Corinne had learned to spend that benefit like currency. I called Grant back and asked the question I hate asking. "Is he safe with her?" A pause. "Physically? For a weekend at her mother's, yes. I wouldn't let it stand otherwise." Then, gentler, "I know that's not the question your body is asking. Your body's asking why you have to hand him over at all. And the answer is because we play it clean, we let her show them who she is, and we get him back for good. Give her the weekend, Nolan. Let her reach." Let her reach. I was getting very tired of how right he kept being. I want to describe the handover because it's the lowest I have ever been. And if you've ever handed your child to someone you don't trust, you already know. And if you haven't, I need you to. I packed his bag the night before. His stool doesn't travel, so I packed the small things that comfort him. The bear with the chewed ear. The 2 board books he makes me read on a loop. I wrote out his schedule on an index card, his foods, his nap, the word he uses when he needs the bathroom. I taped it to the front of the bee like that would make her read it. The exchange was at a police station lobby, fluorescent and cold, because that's the neutral ground the order named. Corinne looked beautiful and rehearsed. She crouched down and opened her arms and said his name in a voice pitched for the security camera. And Theo, my steady, funny barometer of a boy, grabbed my collar with both fists and said, "No, Daddy, no." I had to unpeel his fingers from my shirt. I had to say, in a voice I kept level by a strength I did not know I had, "It's okay, bud. Daddy's coming back. Daddy always comes back." He was still reaching for me over her shoulder as she carried him out the glass doors. Both arms. The reach you're not supposed to be able to refuse. I refused nothing. I just wasn't allowed to answer it. I don't cry easy. My mother says I got that from Walter. But I sat in that parking lot with my forehead on the wheel, and for about a minute I let it go, where no one could see, where he couldn't see. Then I drove home to an empty house and a step stool nobody was standing on. I did not move that stool. I left it right where he'd left it, angled toward the bench, waiting. Wait. He came back different, not hurt. I checked. I checked everything, gently, the way you have to. Not hurt, but quiet, folded in. He didn't ask for his stool. He didn't tell me the clamps were heavy. He watched me for 2 days like he wasn't sure I'd stay either. From what I pieced together, from Theo's few words, from a text Tessa risked sending, Corinne had spent the weekend at Marielle's, and Theo had spent most of it with a hired sitter while Corinne recovered from the stress. She'd posted photos, though, 3 of them holding him, captioned about how a mother's love never dies. She left him with a stranger and photographed the parts that looked like love. I didn't rage, notice that. Not because I'm a saint, but because it's the whole strategy and the whole man. I wrote down the sitter's name. I told Adele Prentice calmly, facts only. And I let Corinne keep reaching. You don't beat someone like that by grabbing. You beat them by holding still while they overreach in front of witnesses. But there was a second weekend before trial, and the second one was worse, because that time he didn't fight at the handover. He'd learned. He went quiet and limp and let himself be carried, and that surrender did something to me that his screaming hadn't. A 2-year-old shouldn't learn that struggling is pointless. That's a thing you unlearn for the rest of your life, if you ever do. I need to tell you what that second handover actually looked like, because he didn't fight, is too small for it. At the first exchange, he'd screamed and clung, and I'd had to peel his fingers off my collar. This time, when I crouched to explain that he was going to spend 2 sleeps at his mother's, he just looked at me, long, the way he looks at a clamp he's decided is too heavy, and then he went still and let Corinne lift him, and he didn't reach for me, and he didn't cry, and that was so much worse, because I knew what it was. It was a boy learning that reaching doesn't always bring somebody, so why bother reaching? It was the exact lesson I'd spent his whole life making sure he'd never learn. And a court order had taught it to him in 1 weekend. Corinne carried him out, pleased, I think, that he'd gone quiet. She read it as him settling. I read it as him giving up. Same picture, opposite meanings. The whole case lived in that gap. I got in the truck, and I did not fall apart. I drove to Grant's office, and I said, "Move the trial up if you can. He can't do many more of these." Between the second handover and the trial, I did the most important work of the whole case, and none of it happened in an office. I rebuilt his trust in me, quietly, every day. The night he came back limp and surrendered from that second weekend, I didn't push. I stayed close. I let him follow me around the shop. I let him sleep in my room, on a nest of blankets on the floor, when he wouldn't stay in his own bed. I answered, "Daddy," every single time he called it into the dark, no matter how many times, so his body would relearn the thing his body already knew before she started taking him, that when he reached, I came. It took days. Then one afternoon, he climbed his step stool at the workbench, out of nowhere, picked up a clamp too big for him, held it up and said, "Heavy, Daddy," and I had to turn around and pretend to look for something on a shelf so he wouldn't see my face. "Real heavy, bud," I said when I could. He was back. Not because I'd won anything yet, because I'd stayed, and staying, repeated enough times, is a language a 2-year-old can read even when he has no words for it. I want you to understand that this was the actual fight, not the subpoenas, not the testimony. This, a boy learning again in his own body that his father was a fixed point. Everything in that courtroom was just going to be about whether a stranger in a robe would let me keep teaching him that.
Hey.
Trial was set for 11 days out, and in those 11 days, the case nearly came apart in my hands. Not through her strength, but through the one weakness I couldn't control. My best witness got scared. Tessa called me on a Sunday, and I could hear it before she said it. "My mother knows I've been talking to you," she said. Her voice was doing something bad. "She doesn't know about the letter, but she knows. She sat me down and, Nolan, she said if I humiliate this family in a courtroom, that's it. Forever. She said Corinne needs me, and I'm choosing a man who married in over my own blood." A breath that shook. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can sit up there and do that to my own sister. I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and every instinct in me screaming to push, to close, to say the thing that would lock her in. I didn't. "Tessa," I said, "I'm not going to talk you into it. If I have to win by pressuring a scared person into betraying her family, then I'm not the safe one in that room. I'm just a different kind of Marielle." I closed my eyes. "You do what you can live with. Theo has me either way. He's got a whole life of me either way. I mean that." There was a long silence. "You're really not going to push," she said, almost angry, almost grateful. "No." "Okay," she said, and hung up, and I did not know. I genuinely did not know for 9 days whether she'd show. That was the bottom, not the handovers. This. Sitting in a house with a quiet little boy in a folder full of paper that couldn't stand up, waiting to find out if the one person who could stand up would be too afraid to. Yay. While Tessa was deciding, so was I. And my mother is the one who set me straight. She came over the night after Tessa's shaking phone call because I'd told her, and she found me doing the thing I do, sitting on the floor of Theo's doorway, back against the frame. She lowered herself down beside me, knees complaining, and we sat there in the hallway like two people at a wake. "You want to take the deal," she said. Not a question. "I want him to never read the word abandoned with his name next to it," I said. "I can protect him from her. I don't know how to protect him from a transcript." My mother was quiet a while. "When your father left," she finally said, "everyone told me to keep the peace. Don't make it ugly, don't say too much. Think of the boy." So I kept quiet, and I let him be a nice, vague absence. And you know what you did with that silence? She looked at me. "You blamed yourself. For years. Because when nobody tells a child the truth, the child decides the truth is that he wasn't enough." I didn't say anything. She'd never put it like that before. "You don't tell Theo the ugly thing," she said. "Not now, not at 10. But you make sure it exists somewhere true so that the day he needs it, and he will, one day, the answer isn't in his own head where it'll poison him. It's in a folder. In a court's words, not his. That transcript isn't the wound, Nolan. It's the thing that lets you take the wound off of him and carry it yourself. I've built a lot of things. I've never made anything as sturdy as what my mother said to me in that hallway. The next morning, I told Grant we were going to trial. I didn't sleep the night before trial. I sat in Theo's doorway most of it, on the floor, back against the frame, listening to him breathe. And I had the thought I'm least proud of and most human for. I could still stop this. I could call Grant in the morning and tell him to take Marielle's old deal. 50-50, split the trust, keep it out of a courtroom. Theo would never have a transcript with the words I never wanted him printed in it. He'd never, at 15, at 25, pull a court record and read in black and white that his mother said it out loud. To win, I might have to make his rejection official, permanent, searchable. I sat there a long time. That hesitation is the closest I ever came to losing him. Not to her, to my own decency. I almost protected him right out of his safe home. Then I looked at him, at the little back rising and falling, and I understood the thing I'd been getting wrong. Protecting him from the truth is my job at 2. Protecting him from her is my job forever. And I could not do the forever job from a 50-50 split with a woman who'd trade him for a bank account. I would carry the transcript. I'd keep it in the same place I keep everything else about that night. And I would make sure that as long as I was alive, the record could sit in a file and never once become the story he lived inside. I made the coffee at 5. I put on the one good jacket. I was ready. Ari. Before I left for the courthouse, I did the most important thing I did all day. I made Theo's morning completely ordinary. Oatmeal he wore, the tractor shirt, the 4-second cling at Pam's door, then the water table, then me forgotten, exactly as it should be. He did not know it was the day. He did not know a room full of adults he'd never meet was about to decide the shape of his childhood. He thought it was a Thursday. That was on purpose. Whatever happened in that courtroom, I wanted his day to be a Thursday. I wanted the machinery of a custody trial to run right past him without casting a single shadow he could see. My mother took the day so she could get him from Pam's if it ran long. I kissed the top of his head, which still smelled like oatmeal, and told him I'd see him at dinner. Dinner, he agreed, granting it. Then I drove to the building where they'd tell me whether dinner was a promise I'd still get to keep. Corinne's lawyer caught me in the courthouse hallway before we went in with one last offer. They do that. The morning of trial is when the nerve of the person who filed runs thinnest. 50-50, he said, low, pleasant. Joint trustee on the account. Everybody walks out apparent. You really want to roll the dice in there, Mr. Hendricks? Judges are unpredictable. You could lose more than you'd settle for. For 1 second, I felt the pull of it. The safe exit, no transcript, no risk, keep most of what I had. Then I thought about a boy going limp in my arms because he'd learned reaching was pointless. And I thought about my mother in a hallway, telling me a wound is lighter when the right person carries it. No, I said. Thank you, but no. I buttoned my jacket. I've spent 15 months being the one who shows up. I'm not going to negotiate that down to every other weekend to make her comfortable. We'll let the judge decide who my son wakes up to. He shrugged like it was my funeral. Maybe he thought it was. I walked into that courtroom lighter than I'd walked into anything in a year. The trial was in a real courtroom, the kind with a gallery. I counted the room the way I count a job before I start it. 18 people, the judge, the Honorable Diane Ashford, 2 lawyers, a clerk and a bailiff, Adele Prentice with her notebook, my mother, straight-backed second row, Pam from the daycare in her church clothes because I'd asked and she'd said yes before I finished the sentence, Marielle in a cream suit, and an empty chair by the aisle in the back. Tessa's chair, empty. I looked at it once and then I made myself stop looking at it. Corinne sat at the petitioner's table in soft gray, looking like a magazine ad for regret. Her lawyer opened and he was good. I'll give him that. A young mother overwhelmed by postpartum depression, a rigid, controlling husband who buried himself in his work and made her a guest in her own home, a mother who fled not from her child but from a marriage, who got well and now only wanted to be the parent she'd been too sick to be. I sat still. Grant had told me, they will make you a monster and you will not react, because the second you react, you become the monster they need. So I let it wash over me. The rigid man, the controlling man, the man who isolated her. Then Marielle took the stand and swore to tell the truth and told the room a version of my marriage in which I was a cold, looming presence and Corinne a trapped bird. She was smooth. She'd practiced. He never wanted her to have a life outside that garage, she said. I thought about a rehearsal dinner, marrying down. I said nothing. My face did nothing. But I felt the room lean her way, the way it had leaned at the emergency order, the whole machine tilting the direction it always tilts. And I thought, for one cold minute, I am going to lose him to the woman who left him in a high chair. Grant stood to cross-examine Marielle, and he did it the way he does everything, quiet, unhurried, a man measuring a board before he cuts. You testified my client isolated your daughter, he said. You've known him how long? Since before the wedding. At the rehearsal dinner, do you recall telling your daughter, in front of guests, that she was marrying down? Marielle's chin lifted. I don't recall my exact words. Do you recall the sentiment? Objection, said Corinne's lawyer. I'll allow it, said Judge Ashford. She was watching Marielle closely now. I may have said something about our different backgrounds, Marielle allowed. There's nothing wrong with a mother having standards. No, Grant agreed. And there's nothing wrong with a man from a different background raising a child alone for 15 months without a single missed doctor's visit. Would you agree he's done that? Marielle said nothing, which, in a courtroom, is a kind of answer. No further questions. She stepped down stiff as a board, and I understood that her contempt for me, the thing she'd carried since a rehearsal dinner, had just been entered into the record as exactly what it was. Not concern for a child, snobbery dressed up as testimony, and a judge had seen the seam.
Let's see.
Then Corinne testified, and I watched the woman I'd once married give the performance of her life. Her lawyer led her through it like a slow dance. She cried at the right moments. Real tears, I think, though grief and self-pity look identical from the gallery. She talked about a darkness after the birth she couldn't climb out of. She said she'd left because she was afraid of what she might do, that leaving was the one loving thing she had strength for. She looked at the judge and said she thought about her son every single day. She was good. If I hadn't lived it, I might have believed her. A few people in the gallery were dabbing their eyes. And here's what she never once did in 40 minutes on that stand. She never described him. Not one specific thing. Not that he lines his tractors up by size. Not that he says heavy about things that aren't. Not the chewed ear on the bear. Not the cup he'll only drink from. Not the 4 seconds he clings before he lets go. She talked about her son the way you talk about a house you used to own. The idea of it, the loss of it, the wanting it back. Never once the actual rooms. I noticed because I know him. And I looked over at Adele Prentice. And Adele was not dabbing her eyes. Adele had spent an evening watching me negotiate a sippy cup on a kitchen floor. Adele was writing. That was the moment I stopped being afraid of the performance. A jury of strangers can be moved by a beautiful woman crying about an abstract child, but this wasn't a jury. It was a judge and a professional whose entire job was to tell the difference between missing a person and missing what the person came with. Corinne missed what he came with. It was going to say so in her own words before the day was done.
But
then Grant called me, and I told the truth plainly and let it be smaller and realer than their story. No speeches, facts. The night she left and what she said in her words, into the microphone. Level. The 16 months of every meal, every fever, every 3 a.m. The daycare, not as an absence, but as what it is, a working father's arrangement. 4 days, home every evening, weekends whole. The 2 visitation weekends and the paid sitter. Flatly, no adjectives. While Adele Prentice wrote and wrote. Corinne's lawyer stood for cross, and he went straight for the trap Grant had warned me about. You don't seem very emotional about the end of your marriage, Mr. Hendricks. I'm emotional about my son, I said. I've learned to keep those in different rooms. A small sound moved through the gallery. Not laughter. Recognition. Isn't it true, he said, that you never wanted to co-parent? That you wanted her gone? No, I wanted her to stay. I asked her to stay once. I did not look at the folder. Grant had told me not to reach for it. Let them reach. She made her feelings clear. In writing. What writing? He said before he could stop himself. And across the room, at the petitioner's table, Corinne's face did something I hadn't seen it do in years. It went still with fear. That's when I heard the courtroom door open at the back. Tessa walked in. She was late and pale, and she came up the aisle past the empty chair she was supposed to be sitting in. And she found me in the gallery first, and then she found the clerk. And she said in a voice that shook but did not stop, I'm here to testify for the father. The whole room turned, Marielle turned, and I watched her aim at her younger daughter, the exact look I'd absorbed for years, the one that says you are about to embarrass this family. It's a powerful look. It had run Tessa's whole life. Tessa took the stand anyway. She sat down, found Theo's face in her mind. I could see her do it, and started talking to her hands. Grant asked her, gently, what she knew about the pregnancy. Tessa took a breath. Corinne told me she planned it. The room changed temperature. She told me she stopped taking the pill and didn't tell Nolan. She said Nolan was going to leave, and Mom said a baby would fix it. And Corinne said, Tessa's voice cracked and she pushed through it. She said, it's the only thing that'll make him stay. He'll never leave a kid. Objection, Corinne's lawyer said, but there was no force in it. Overruled, said Judge Ashford. Continue. Grant asked quietly, did your sister ever tell you how she felt about the child after he was born? Tessa looked at me, and I gave her the smallest nod, because I'd stopped on the floor of my son's doorway, wrestling with this exact moment, and I'd decided that protecting him sometimes means letting the truth stand in daylight so no one can ever swing it in the dark again. She left him a letter when she walked out, Tessa said. My mother told her to throw it away. I kept it. Nolan has it. She looked at the judge. It says she never wanted him. In her own handwriting, 15 months before she said in this room that being apart from him broke her heart. Day. I have watched a lot of things get built and a lot of things come apart. And the sound is the same at the exact center, a held silence, right before the shape changes for good. Corinne's lawyer tried to save it on cross. He went at Tessa the way you go at a witness you're afraid of. You've always been jealous of your sister, haven't you? The overlooked one. This is your chance to hurt her. Tessa's chin came up. And here's the thing about a person who's been called the lesser one her whole life. When she finally decides to stand, she is not easy to knock down. I've been overlooked my whole life, she said quietly, so I know exactly what it looks like when a kid is about to be. That's why I'm here. Not to hurt her, to make sure Theo never grows up the way she made me feel. She looked at Corinne not cruelly, almost like grief. I'm sorry, Cor. I couldn't help you do this to him. Corinne looked away first. Grant called one more witness before he rested. Pam from the daycare. She'd never been in a courtroom. She wore her church clothes and held her own hands. And she told the court, plainly, the thing she'd told the stranger on the phone weeks before. I've watched that little boy get dropped off almost every day for over a year, she said. By him. She nodded at me. Early. Always early. He knows every kid's name in that room. He knows which ones are having a hard week. When Theo spiked a fever last winter, his dad was there in 11 minutes. She looked at the judge. Somebody called my center a while back, asking if that boy was neglected. I've done this 30 years. I know neglect. That is not what that is. That's the opposite of that. Corinne's lawyer didn't have much for her. What do you ask the woman who's watched the truth happen 4 days a week? He asked whether she'd ever seen the mother. Pam said kindly. No, sir, that's rather my point. She stepped down and gave me the smallest nod on her way past, and I had to look at the table for a second. That was 3 now. The sister, the guardian, the daycare director, one after another, ordinary people who'd actually stood in the rooms where my son's life happened, saying the same thing in different words. He stayed. That one always stayed. The letter was entered. Judge Ashford read it herself, unhurried, glasses low, the way my mother reads things she'd like to throw. She read it twice. Then she set it down and looked at Corinne over the top of the frames. Mrs. Hendricks, she said, I'd like to hear from you directly. Corinne went back on the stand, and this is the part where I did nothing, where the case turned not on my cleverness, but on the thing Grant promised me the first day. A person who's really after the money has a hard time not saying so, especially when she's losing. The judge asked her, plainly, you had no contact with your son for 15 months. No calls, no cards, no support. Help me understand what changed. Corinne's composure had a hairline crack in it now, and she picked exactly the wrong moment to defend her pride. I have rights, she said. I'm his mother. I don't have to earn him back like some employee. That child is a Vance. His future is family money, and it should be handled by his family, not... She gestured at me, and the word came out before she could catch it. Not spent on some wood shop. Silence. Marielle closed her eyes. Judge Ashford let the silence run long enough that everyone in that room heard what Corinne had said, and heard what she hadn't. Not I miss him. Not I'm sorry. Not one word about the actual boy. His future is family money. Thank you, the judge said. That's very clarifying. She didn't say it warmly. She said it the way you say found it when you finally locate the rot behind the wall. Corinne understood, a half second too late, what she'd done. I watched it hit her, and for just a moment, I'll be honest, because I promised you the truth, I felt something almost like pity. She'd spent so long performing a mother that she'd forgotten to become one, and now the performance had said the quiet part into a microphone, on the record, forever. Almost pity, not quite. Theo was still at daycare, not knowing his whole life hung in a room he'd never see. Grant had a few questions for her before she stepped down. He asked them quietly, almost kindly, which is the most dangerous way he asks anything. Mrs. Hendricks, did you write your husband a letter the night you left? A pause. I was not well. That's not what I asked. Did you write it? Yes. And in it, did you write the words, I never wanted him? The courtroom held its breath. Corinne's eyes went to Marielle, and Marielle could not help her, and I watched her understand that too. I was in a dark place, Corinne said. People say things. They do, Grant agreed, but they don't usually put them in writing. Sign them, then wait 15 months and swear the opposite under oath. He let it sit exactly one beat. No further questions. She stepped down carefully. The way you cross ice you already heard crack. Adele Prentice gave the Guardian ad litem's recommendation last, and she'd revised it. I knew because she looked at me first with something that had not been on her face on my porch. She told the court the child was securely, primarily bonded to his father. Sorry, that the father's caregiving, daycare included, was consistent, safe, and child-centered. She cited Pam's written account by name. That the mother's sudden interest coincided precisely with her discovery of the trust. That the 2 weekends of contact had involved a paid sitter and social media documentation inconsistent with hands-on parenting, and that reintroducing the mother as a primary caregiver was not, in her professional judgment, in this child's best interest. Judge Ashford asked the Guardian ad litem her own questions, the way she does when she's already most of the way to a decision and wants it clean for the record. In your professional opinion, the judge said, is this petition motivated by the child's welfare, the trust, or both? Adele didn't flinch. The timing speaks for itself, Your Honor. Ms. Hendricks initiated no contact for 15 months. She filed within weeks of learning the trust's value. In 14 years doing this work, I've learned that a parent moved by love asks first how the child is sleeping. This petition led with a request to control his money. In the second row, Marielle went very still in her cream suit. And the father? The judge asked. In 14 years, Adele said, I have rarely seen a caregiver this consistent. He's not a perfect parent. There's no such thing. He's a present one. That's rarer and it matters more. Then she said one more thing, off her notes, to the room. Children know who stays, she said. This one does. If you've made it this far and something here is landing on your own life, a parent who chose money over you, a person who left and called it love, a court that made you prove you were the safe one, I hope you'll do one thing this week. Set the boundary you've been afraid to set. You don't owe your presence to people who only reach for you when there's something in it for them. Judge Ashford ruled from the bench. She does that when she's certain. Sole legal and physical custody to me. Supervised visitation for Corinne, contingent on completing counseling. The court's version of a door left open a crack, for Theo's sake, not hers. And the trust to remain administered by me, as custodial parent and trustee, under the court's oversight. Corinne didn't cry. She stood up too fast, the way you do when a chair has betrayed you, and walked out through 18 people. Marielle followed in her cream suit. Neither looked at the second row where my mother sat, or at the stand where Tessa still sat with her face in her hands. Right. Tessa found me in the parking lot, shaking. She'll never speak to me again, she said. Neither of them. That's it. I'm out of that family. I know, I said. Thank you doesn't cover it. I didn't do it for you. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and almost laughed. I did it for the kid who tells everybody the clamps are heavy. I told her she'd have a place in his life for as long as she wanted one. The good aunt, the one who shows up. She's had it since. She comes on Sundays. She's terrible at cabinetry, and Theo thinks she's a genius. Marielle, I never spoke to again. Corinne did the counseling for a while and takes her supervised hours sometimes. Theo comes back from them folded in for a day, then unfolding. I let him. I don't say a word against her, not one. The trust sits where Walter left it, growing quietly, untouched, except for the things it was meant for. A college account, a savings bond, a future somebody's building on purpose. Corinne's name is nowhere near it. The court made me its keeper, which was only paperwork catching up to what had already been true for over a year. Life is smaller now, and better. Sunday mornings are Tessa and terrible coffee and a boy who thinks she's a genius. Thursdays, my mother takes him so I can catch up at the shop. And every single day, without fail, I'm the one who's there when he wakes up and the one who's there when he goes down. That turned out to be the whole prize. Not the money, not the win in that courtroom. The mornings. Which brings me, finally, to the doorway. To the sentence I said I'd never take back. 16 months before all of this, she stood there with her suitcase and said, I never wanted him. And I looked at my son reaching for her, both arms, the reach you're not supposed to be able to refuse, and I made her a promise instead of a wound. I said, I know, he'll never know it from me. That was the whole thing, not a threat, a vow. I promised the woman who didn't want him that our son would grow up never once feeling it, that I'd carry her leaving so he would never have to. That's why he still asks when mommy is coming home, because I never taught him not to hope. I decided a long time ago that his childhood would not be built out of what she wasn't. He's asleep down the hall right now. Tomorrow he'll climb his step stool. I carved his name into the side of it last month, THEO, so it's his and no one can file a petition for it. And he'll hand me clamps he can't lift and tell me they're heavy. They're not. He is the only heavy thing I have ever been glad to carry. Some people were never wanted by the person who was supposed to want them most. If that's you, hear it from a man who builds things for a living. You can become somebody's whole reason to stay, even if you were once somebody's excuse to leave. Being chosen, it turns out, is a thing you can do for another person. I do it every single morning, and I have never, not once, wanted to take it back. Compliance verification. Names used in this script. 1. Nolan Hendricks, MC. Checkmark European origin, not on blacklist, reserved via name ledger 2. Corinne, antagonist wife. Checkmark European origin, not on blacklist 3. Marielle Vance, antagonist mother-in-law. European origin, not on blacklist 4. Tessa Vance, ally sister. European origin, not on blacklist 5. Maureen Hendricks, ally mother. European origin, not on blacklist 6. Theodore Hendricks, child. European origin, not on blacklist. 7. Walter, late stepfather. Checkmark European origin, not on blacklist 8. Grant Sullivan, lawyer. Checkmark European origin, not on blacklist 9. Adele Prentice, guardian ad litem. Checkmark European origin, not on blacklist 10. Pam, daycare director. Honorable Diane Ashford, judge. Checkmark European origin, not on blacklist. Numbers verification. No numbers ending in 47. Key numbers: Nolan 31, Corinne 29, Marielle 58, Tessa 26, Maureen 60, Theo 2. Trust approximately $400,000. 18 people in courtroom, approximately 15 to 16 months of sole care. Married at 26, approximately $40,000 kitchen island. Timeline verification. All events before today's anchor, July 9th, 2026. Pregnancy spring 2023. Theo, born early 2024. Walkout. March 2025. Petition vows trial. Spring-summer 2026. Internal consistency verified. Ages. Pregnancy math. Custody timeline. Court procedure. Content safety. No graphic violence/sexual/child abuse content. Abandonment and neglect handled by reference and consequence, not depiction. MC nonviolent. Righteous. Reversal via legitimate truth. Sister testimony. Mother's own letter. Mother's own courtroom admission. Daycare account. GAL report. Not revenge. Reproductive coercion premise handled through emotional/legal consequence. No explicit content. Only 3 CTAs. Like plus location end of phase 2, comment/prediction mid, reflection after reveal. No CTA after final line.